pay recognition, to salute and say thank you to all of our veterans for what you've done and what you're doing to serve our country. Gun violence. Gun violence is a public health crisis in our nation. And as everyone under the sound of my voice knows, Birmingham has felt its effects. I want to let you in on something we've been saying at City Hall, and that is we refuse to rest on our laurels. We have an immediate mandate to address this issue. Fellow Kiwanis, this epidemic goes well beyond a mere city-led solution. Likewise, it will take more than just increasing policing to get results. The key to a safer Birmingham lies in collaboration, the coming together of like minds and shared experiences to create a game plan to effectively address crime, particularly gun violence. To that end, we look at the vast wealth of resources in our community, those individuals recognized for not only their thought leadership, creative approaches to complex problems, but mainly a love for our city. And then we took a page from Mayor Arrington, who, when faced with a similar crisis in the past, created a crime commission to bring viable solutions to the table. That's why we are here today, and we are extremely grateful for General Roper for his effort as a proven leader. We're thankful for your expertise, as well as the members of the commission who've already been recognized. They've already stood and their names have already been called, so I'll just skip that part and simply say this. There is no one simple fix to remedy the scourge of gun violence we face. But this gathering of minds will allow us to hear different perspectives, as well as weigh different approaches in our quest for what we all collectively want, a safer Birmingham. To that end, the key is collaboration, and I'm confident in this group of leaders and the men and women not only in this room who've been recognized, but the other men and women who serve on this commission. Thank you for your service to Birmingham.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership as always. And Dr. Hicks, I will let you introduce our speaker.
So our speaker, General A.C. Roper, is a founder and CEO of a leadership consulting LLC. And he is a distinguished transformative leader with influence extending the local level, national, and throughout the world. As a citizen soldier, General Roper made history in 2021 when he became the first African American in the history of the United States Army Reserve to ever achieve the rank of Lieutenant General. And that's with 3 stars. He retired earlier this year as Deputy Commander of the U.S. Northern Command and U.S. Element, responsible for Homeland Defense and disaster support for civilian authorities. In this assignment, his command prepared and responded to threats against North America, including the Russian long-range aviation, North Korean missile launches, the Chinese high-altitude balloon and operations, and he supported over 80,000 Afghan evacuees. So in his civilian capacity, as you all know, General Roper has 33 years of law enforcement experience, culminating in his tenure as the Chief of Police of the City of Birmingham. So he has a Bachelor of Science from Troy State University, a Master of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Alabama, a Master of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy, the FBI National Executive Institute, and the FEMA Crisis Leadership Fellowship. He also attended the National Counterterrorism Fellowship in Israel and has studied executive leadership development at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. I'm just giving you some brief highlights of his long, extensive, exemplary career. Now, this is what I do know, that General Roper is a man of deep faith, moral fortitude, and humility. To some, he has been known as officer, detective, lieutenant, sergeant, training coordinator, bureau commander, chief, twice a citizen, CEO, professor, or general. To others, he's known as mentor, husband, father, servant leader, and minister. Now, I believe it's safe to say to all that this descendant of a Buffalo soldier, he is a true American hero. Please join me in welcoming Birmingham's own General A.C. Roper.
I have never heard an introduction like that, so you have to go with me wherever I speak. Thank you so much, and I'm gonna hit my stopwatch here. So good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. The head table, Kiwanians, special guests, thank you for showing up on this great day in our nation's history. My wife and I were at the polls 45 minutes this morning, early, 45 minutes before the polls opened, and got our votes in, and it was such a smooth process. And of course, when I was asked to speak months ago, it was regarding Veterans Day, but there's so much has occurred since then, and so we got a lot of ground to cover. And when I think about Veterans Day from a Birmingham perspective, remember, this is the birthplace of Veterans Day. It was called Armistice Day, which commemorated the ending of World War I, and my granddad was actually gassed on the last day of the war in France. And I said, Granddad, only you would get gassed on the last day of the war. And so he would be so honored, Corporal William Roper, from right here in Birmingham also. And so there is no doubt we have the greatest fighting force the world has ever known. Let me say that again. We have the greatest fighting force the world has ever known. And it's because of our personnel. And so let's recognize our veterans again. And so I'm going to cover a lot of ground today because I can speak from the military perspective in Veterans Day, I can speak from the law enforcement perspective, and I think I can cover it all under this topic. When I think about my concerns today, I have some concerns for our nation. And this is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Let me say that again. This is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is. And you may say, well, we have an issue with this or with that. We do. But we're still the shining light for the world to follow. And so we're all praying for peaceful transitions of power. I'm concerned about some of the divisiveness. I think we can disagree respectfully. I'm concerned about the influence of foreign actors trying to undermine the very foundations of our democracy. And we've got to be cautious and aware of that. And so I think I can cover most of that under this topic, modern day leadership in an uncertain world. Modern day leadership in an uncertain world. And I would say that leadership is more crucial today than ever before, especially as we navigate these complex challenges. And so regardless of the organization, John Maxwell in his book, 21 Laws of Leadership, he has one law titled The Law of the Lid, where he says no organization can rise higher than the level of its leadership. So whether it's a mom and pop store or a Fortune 500 company, leadership makes a difference. And so allow me to share a little bit of my leadership journey. When I retired in 2018, after spending a decade as the chief, I get a call to come up to the Pentagon to be the deputy chief up there and work strategy, policies, and planning. And from that position, I was asked to go down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and run operations for 190,000 soldiers deployed worldwide. And from that position, I was nominated to be a 3-star general and serve as the deputy commander of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD. And so where we defended and continue to defend and protect our nation's interests. So this meant that in a 3-year period, when I retired in 2018, as chief, 99 neighborhoods here in the city, 3 years later, I'm the number 2 person responsible for defending the U.S. and Canada. How does that happen? So we have been blessed with amazing mentors and amazing opportunities. And so let me also mention that after I retired, I use the word retired loosely, I see life through a leadership lens. And so we stood up this leadership firm, and I get to do what I really like doing, speaking, teaching, consulting all around the leadership issue. My wife and I formalized a ministry we've been working on for the last couple of years. And in fact, in January, we'll host a conference right here in this room, the Saturday of Martin Luther King weekend. I finished my leadership book. I'd been working on it for years, but I kept adding to it. And so finally, I reached a point, my wife said, you need to stop. At some point, maybe you can do a part 2. So that should be published before June of next year. And you can sign up for my leadership blog and get updates on the book at acroper.net. So all of that is going well. So when I think about this modern day leadership in an uncertain world, and I look at it from a global lens, as a nation, we see increased threats from 2 heavyweights, Russia and China, what we call strategic competition. And we're seeing closer cooperation between the two. We see increased missile capability from North Korea. I would say Kim Jong-un woke me up many a nights when my red switch would ring, and I would have to answer the phone within 3 rings and determine if his latest missile launch is a threat to North America or to our allies in the region. I would also say that Iran, you see, as they continue to fund and support terrorism, what has occurred in the Middle East. And so we see these increasing threats to our nation. And then when you couple that with technology and cyber and artificial intelligence and robotics and what's occurring in space, we see a whole new threat paradigm to our nation. And so, in fact, you can quote me on this, we're under attack every day in the information space and in cyber. Every day, we're under attack in the information space with misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, and in the cyber realm. And so we have to lead our way through these challenges. So I just give you a little bit of a day in my life over the last 3 years. The PRC high altitude balloon, you may remember this February of a couple of years ago, and as it traversed across the U.S. And what we saw here, it was a significant emotional event for our nation. As this Chinese high altitude surveillance balloon traveled across the U.S., causing national security concerns. And this incident required rapid decision making. It required clarity of purpose. That's what guides teams even through the most complex situations. So when you look at the picture that would be on your left, that's a picture of the balloon from a U-2 air platform looking down at it. And then the picture on the right is recovery operations off of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We actually plotted kill zones across the U.S., but we needed authority to engage it. And when we got the authority, we were able to take it down in water and then recover it. And we learned some things that we haven't learned before. So the leadership lesson here is in crisis, leaders must be decisive, must be clear, must be composed, and complex problems require a network of teams. But here's the catch, those teams have to be formed before the crisis hits. You have to form the teams pre-crisis and work toward a unified goal. Second, this one is one that was really, really interesting. Operation Allies Welcome. When we brought Afghan refugees over to the U.S. who had supported us and risked their lives in support of our military efforts. And it was our responsibility as U.S. Northern Command to ensure their safe arrival. We coordinated everything from housing to medical care to job training. But an interesting tidbit, and I confirmed it with my boss this morning. I said, I want to make sure I have this number right. I knew I did. Our initial mission assignment was to prepare to host, to receive 3,000 Afghans in one location. 3,000 Afghans in one location. But as you know, no plan survives first contact. And we actually ended up receiving 80,000, and we built 8 locations. So we, in essence, built 8 cities to host our Afghan partners. And really, the leadership lesson here is leadership goes beyond command. It's about empathy, it's about compassion, but it's also about adaptability and agility. How can you adjust on the fly and build the strategic acumen to still accomplish the mission? And I would say here that my law enforcement experience was crucial. The lessons learned, as I talk about in my book, the position of perspective. The position of perspective gave me amazing insight into this where I could ask the right questions. For example, if you're moving X number of people into a community, into a base, onto a fort, and the communities are concerned, who has the mission to talk to the homeowners association? Who has the mission to talk to the neighborhood groups? Things that quite often our military don't think about. But being a former police chief, I can say, okay, who got the stick? Who got the stick to go out and go to that neighborhood meeting and talk about what we're doing? From a police perspective, I could talk about CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. How you lay out that city, that small city, has a lot to do with safety, security, and perceptions. And so who's doing that? Sir, we've never heard of that. Well, that's why I'm here, because now you've heard of it. So let's get moving. And so we were able to accomplish this mission. And what you see in this one photo, the Marines with their backs turned to us, that's Fort Pickett, Virginia. We had to adjust and build female engagement teams because of the cultural criteria and requirements of the Afghan culture. You can't have strange men interacting with their female Afghans. And so we built these female engagement teams to do that kind of work. And you can see 3 ladies right there walking with that Afghan lady right there. And then the picture on the right is Fort Bliss, Texas, where we built another city there. And so let me add that politics was involved in all of them. It colored it. So from the White House to the Senate to the House to state government to local government, politics plays a role. There were congressional hearings on both of these missions. Even though they were successful, our form of government, we still have to answer why we did what we did when we did. And so how do you lead your way through this in a VUCA world, a world that's volatile, a world that's ambiguous, a world that's uncertain, a world that's complex? And so I would say all of these things that I've mentioned actually have an impact on local policing and first responders. And so when you really think about these global issues, so whether it's cyber or whether it's terrorism and radicalization, whether it's climate impacts and the impact on a local economy, all of this at some point has an impact. And so when I think about this policing conundrum, let me first mention the calling. Because police, and I think I'm in a unique perspective over the course of my careers to really understand the intersection and convergence of homeland defense, homeland security, and hometown safety. Let me say that again. Homeland defense, homeland security, and hometown safety. And there's this convergence now much more than ever before because of globalization. The world is flat, as Thomas Friedman said in his book many, many years ago. So this policing conundrum exists. And so first is the calling. And we have amazing men and women, amazing, courageous men and women answering the call. Now, from a recruiting and retention standpoint, we need more. And the mayor has presented a proposal to get after that issue. But the calling is so important. Why? Because police are the most visible arm of city government. Police are the most visible. I love my fire department brothers and sisters, but they don't patrol in those big red trucks. They only bring them out the garage when there's a call. So it's the police departments that are the most visible. And they are also the most responsive 24 hours a day. They will send someone to call. They will send someone to help. And I was thinking about over my time as chief, I remember we got a call about a turtle in the road. Because who are you going to call when a turtle is crossing the road and you're concerned about it? You call 911, and we dispatch a sharp officer to go out there and solve the problem. Well, we didn't get the problem solved quick enough. So he shows up, the officer shows up, drives down the street, doesn't see the turtle. Apparently the caller was watching. He didn't stop because I'm sure he was thinking, I don't see it smashed in the road, so it must have made it. So she calls back and says, I didn't see the officer stop and look for the turtle. So being the responsive police force we are, we sent him back. So at this point, another brother officer says, you know what, I better go help him. So now we have 2 police cars on the side of the road looking for the turtle. Well, it's obvious the turtle has made it safely. And I would often tell people at that time, back then, our call center would ring anywhere between 50 to 60,000 times a month, the number of 911 calls. And let's say for the sake of simple math, it's 50,000 times a month, because it depends on weather and other factors. If we got 99.9% right, we still mishandled 50 calls. No one gets on the news and say, you know what? That police department is outstanding. They handled 49,950 calls right. It's the 50 that we didn't handle right that we're judged upon. So the calling is critical. But not just the calling, what also adds to this conundrum is the collision. What do you mean the collision? I'm talking about socioeconomic conditions and other factors which the police department has no control over. And they will often fall into the lap of a 21-year-old officer to some kind of way get it solved. And so that means a 21-year-old officer at 1 a.m. may get a call about homelessness, unhoused people. That means mental illness calls. We've seen an increase across the nation. When the person doesn't take their medication, people call 911. If they take too much and they're out of control, they call 911. And we will send a police officer. And so this collision of these socioeconomic factors affect this conundrum, which then leads to the complexities. So this means, catch this, the police department being the most responsible and the most visible arm of city government gets called into and pulled into a melting pot of complex issues that are then played out on social media and other forms of media for the whole world to see. So global issues become local, and our police departments are one call away. And that's why the Birmingham Crime Commission is so critically important. And the leaders that are in this room that are a part of it, thank you. You are getting after it already. I mean, getting after it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Working groups have been formed. Research and investigation is going on right now. Data is being gathered. And so these working groups are working extremely hard to give the mayor the report that he has charged us to complete. So as we look at the competencies, how do we lead our way through these challenges? And so I'm going to mention a couple, and I've already hit on a few, and then we'll have some Q&A. And so the first competency I would like to mention is visionary thinking. Leaders must be forward thinking. They must anticipate challenges and prepare solutions right in the midst of the crisis. At Northern Command, we used to always say, think beyond the horizon. think beyond the horizon. Think beyond the horizon. Whether in national defense or neighborhood watch, local leaders must do the same. So whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's business, whether it's government, we have to think beyond the horizon. And leaders who see that big picture and inspire others to prepare for it are the leaders who will drive real change. And when everything around us is under attack, when everything around us it may be sinking sand, it's that vision that will keep us focused. Second, resilience. And during my tenure at Northern Command and even those positions before, we faced everything from homeland defense issues to natural disasters and responding and supporting our civilian authorities. And the ability to persevere is a true hallmark of leadership. And in local government, at the local level, resilience is critical. Whether it's navigating budget cuts, responding to crises, or managing public expectations, the strength to endure and overcome is what sets successful leaders apart. I mentioned the word empathy. Understanding and addressing the needs of those you lead and those you impact is absolutely critical. So you may recall as chief, we would walk the neighborhoods, not because I needed exercise, but we wanted to meet people right where they were and engage and hear their concerns. And that's one of the things that we're doing with the Crime Commission. We have a community input team whose mission is to get input from the communities that we are serving. And so the same walking that we did in the Birmingham communities, those 8 cities that we built for the Afghan refugees, I walked those neighborhoods also. Had to have a translator, but I walked those neighborhoods so I can hear from the people we were hosting. Lou Holtz, the legendary football coach, said it best. He says people want to know 3 things. It was true then when he said it, and it's true today. People want to know 3 things. Do you care? Are you committed? And can I trust you? Do you care? Are you committed? And can I trust you? Fourth, agility, adaptability. I mentioned that earlier. Leaders who can pivot and adapt are absolutely invaluable. We had to adapt during the COVID pandemic. We had to go from homeland defense to how do we mobilize thousands of military personnel to support our civilian hospitals and medical centers out there. It was a shift, but we did it on the fly, and we were extremely successful with it too. We also learned lessons like, I get a phone call from the VA and they say, hey, General Roper, I hear you're the person who's running all this, and I got a question, got a concern. Okay, what's that? Please don't mobilize any medical personnel who work at the VA. Makes sense. Okay, got it, thank you. We also knew we couldn't mobilize personnel who were fighting COVID in Alabama and move them to Michigan. So if you're engaged in the COVID fight in your local communities, we got to leave you alone because you're already engaged. So working through all of those types of nuances was very, very important. And now with technological advances, with AI, machine learning, robotics, etc., quantum computing, all of that, leaders who are agile, leaders who can adapt are going to be even more valuable in the future. And lastly, integrity. Working from big to small, I made this the final point because this one is the most crucial. Integrity. Having that foundation. And so this one, you can adjust on the other ones, but this one has to be solid all day long. Integrity. I've learned that actions must align with values, and we're judged on our integrity. This one was so crucial for me, and even as chief of police, that I personally, and I've met police chiefs from all over the nation, they said, how did you make time? I said, I had to make time. But for 10 years, I personally, and I got some of my front office staff right here, they'll tell you, and Chief Smith ran my office. He was my operations, my executive officer. That calendar, we had to make time for me to personally teach the ethics class to every new police officer. 4 hours of hearing from the chief on what this badge means. And if you tarnish it, I will fire you. Because integrity is non-negotiable. Why would you say that? And why are you so adamant? Because out of all the commodities and values in the world, all the valuables, there's nothing more valuable than trust when it comes to relationships. And as a police department, we have to have trust with the citizens we serve. The world is looking for people and organizations they can trust. And so for 4 hours, the chief and every new police recruit, and if I couldn't make it for some reason, we rescheduled the class so that I could personally teach the ethics course. And so I think it was crucial for every new officer to hear from me, to understand the values of the organization. And so as each of us continue in our leadership journey, whether in local government, business, or the nonprofit world, remember that leadership is about legacy. Leadership is about legacy. And I talk about that a lot in my book, because my granddad being a Buffalo soldier, my dad being a civil rights foot soldier, and now I get to follow in their footsteps. That I'm standing on their shoulders. And the legacy is much more than valuables. Legacy is about values. Legacy is much more than wealth. Legacy is about wisdom. So not only should the organization be better because we're here, someone's life should be better because we're here. Jim Collins said in his book, From Good to Great, build a pocket of greatness right where you are. You may not be able to change the whole world, but you can change your corner of it. And so, Kiwanians, I charge you to build a pocket of greatness right where you are. Thank you so much. So they gave me 30 minutes to speak. I used 26. And so now we got time for a little Q&A. I'm an open book, so if I don't know it, I'll make it up. Anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
First, General Roper, thank you for your service to our country and to our city and what you are trying to do in every job you hold. You've been gone, if I calculated it right, from the city position of leadership over half a decade. And when you were here, we had to have a problem that persists today, which is gangs, and persisted long before you got there. I'm just curious, what then was the biggest problem with that? Are the same gangs still here and new ones there? And where was the task force to address that, and how did it work? I'm just really curious on how do we really do this? I know that it's a national problem.
Yes, sir. It is. And so, yes, gangs have existed for a long time. And we had more neighborhood-based gangs back then. Now you're starting to see more of a national nexus at times. But gangs give, and I don't know if we have any people in here who work with young people, but I used to say, and it's still true today, gangs give our primarily young men things they're not getting at home. So in other words, where a family should give identity, the gang gives identity. Where a family should sit down and have dinner together, the gang sits down and have dinner. Where a family should give corrections and discipline, the gangs give correction and discipline. So you can see how quite often a gang can give what the family should provide. And of course, you also have the issues of money And so now you're starting to see, and it's not just a Birmingham issue, it's across the nation. I've been to the border more times than I can count. I actually led the first complex investigation down there. And so it's national. You know, drugs and primarily come north, and money and guns go south. And so there's concerns on both sides. And so what you're seeing now is just more volatility. You're seeing more growth. You're seeing, because of technology, there's more of a connection. Not in every instance, but you're starting to see more of that across the nation. But absolutely a great question. And it takes, as the mayor mentioned about the collaboration, quite often, because it's crossing state lines, it takes a federal nexus. So we need the ATF, we need the FBI, we need the DEA, the Secret Service, all to help us and partner with us to really get after that. Great question. Any others? See a hand back there? Yes, sir. Oh my. See, that was a softball. All right, that was a good one. So I will say this. And I've spent so much time down in Mexico. And in fact, I have people I consider friends now with Sedena, that's the Mexican Army, and Samara, the Mexican Navy. I've hosted them. They've hosted me. I would say we need two things in our nation. And they're not opposed to each other. We can have a secure border and a sane immigration system. We don't have to choose between the two. We can have them both. And I remember being in Mexico City, and they would put me up in the hotel right there next to the U.S. Embassy. And I went jogging one morning, 5 o'clock. I'm going to be in meetings all day at the embassy and with the militaries down there. And I come out the hotel, make a right turn, and I'm going to run by the embassy. And there's a line that looked like Disneyland. I'm talking down the street, around the corner, down another street. These are people waiting for an appointment to even start the process to get into our country legally. And that was to get an appointment. And so when my driver picked me up, I asked him about that. And he said, yeah, these people will get appointments like in 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And I'm like, what? And so this is the shining light for the world, this country. And you have people who would like to get in legally, but the process is discombobulated. And then, of course, the border being the way the border is set up, and I've been there and seen there's a lot of work to be done there. And so when you put those two together, you get this conundrum, this issue. But if I was going to, I don't think the military by itself, I think you got to have some legislative actions too. You know, you had that bipartisan proposal earlier. And so I think you got to put all that together, but you got to have a secure border because we have to know who's coming in. We know other nations now are starting to come across, not just the south border, but there's a north border also that doesn't get as much media attention. And so with the threats that we're facing, we need to work towards that, and we also have to have the legislative willpower. I just believe there's no problem that this nation can't solve. There's no problem we can't solve. And I think we can do that in a humane fashion. So I'll stop right there. Great question, though. That was a good one. All right. Maybe have time for one more, do we? One more? Okay, let's go over here. And you're good. We're good? Okay, right here. Well, I would tell you, and this is just the world according to me. There are some efficiencies we would gain. There are some effectiveness we would gain because the question about gangs earlier, they don't care about city limits. They really don't. They don't care about police jurisdictions. And so, but whether we can get 31, 30 plus leaders thinking the same way, I think is a challenge. But I think there's some, for example, when I became chief back in 2007, there was a lot of talk about a metropolitan jail, a metro jail, because it would be much more efficient, much more effective, et cetera, and we just couldn't get it off the ground. Some were for, some were against, and now what is it now? 2007, now it's 2024, just no movement there. And so I know the mayor, he believes in regional cooperation, and you may not be able to start with law enforcement. You may have to start with some other areas and build that trust. But there are some task forces out there that work across jurisdictional lines, but we're nowhere near where we need to be in regards to that kind of vision. All right, so I think it's...
There's one more.
There's one more? I'll take it. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much for being here. I am wondering why Birmingham is such an outlier for violence and how is the commission going to help with that?
So you said, why is Birmingham such an outlier?
For violence, and how is the commission going to help with that?
And how the commission will help with that? Okay, all right. That sounds like a media question, but I'll take that on. It was. And so, first of all, I'm not going to say Birmingham is an outlier for violence, because there's violence issues all across the nation. I mean, mass shootings all across the nation, school shootings all across the nation. So I would disagree with that portion. Now, if you're going to compare a city of Birmingham size to a small suburb, then the comparisons would not be equal. But looking across the nation, I would not say Birmingham is an outlier for violence. What I will say is the commission has the mandate of looking at national models across the nation that has worked, that has been successful, and we are bringing those back and looking at those, and then we'll make a presentation and report to the mayor. And what may end up occurring, and I don't want to speak out of turn because we're nowhere near close to finishing the research, but we may end up taking a piece of a model from one city and a hybrid model from another city to make it fit Birmingham. What will work in Birmingham? And I think someone asked me before I got up here, I think the stars are aligned for us to make transformational change. Not just change, but transformational change. I know that's what the mayor is pushing, and that's his mandate, not just for the commission, but for the city. And each of us have a role to play in that. How do we achieve transformational change and alter the direction of Birmingham when it comes to violence? I think it's doable. And Lee, over here, one of our chairs, he told us what the vision is on the commission. And when I give this vision, you should be impressed how Birmingham became the safest city in America. Now, that doesn't happen overnight, but you have to have a big vision to marshal the resources, to marshal the leadership, to marshal the support. And over time, there is no reason why we can't do as well and even better than other cities. Mr. President, I think I'll stop right there.
Thank you. General Roper, thank you for your leadership. That message was timely and motivational, inspirational. We appreciate all that you're continuing to do, and thank you for being here.